Hi, my name is Erin, and today we're going to be talking about the US founding documents. And so the first document we're going to talk about is the Mayflower Compact, which was signed in 1620, and this was signed by 41 adult males. And so the Mayflower Compact was signed because you had some families coming over from Europe, or more specifically England, to what they called the New World, or which is today present day, the United States or the entire the continent of North America, right? And so these people came largely because they were fleeing religious persecution and because they wanted to seek religious freedom, right? And so what they decided to do was kind of create this new society in a new land where they would be governed by certain principles or new laws. And those ideas, those principles, and those laws were really captured in this document known as the Mayflower Compact. And so a couple of kind of the tenets of the document was one that the colonists would practice Christianity, that the colonists would work together to contribute to the society, and the colonists would create, in quotes, laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices for the good of the colony. And so this is really kind of the beginning of this trend that you see throughout history, which is that people are kind of putting these ideas and principles down on paper, and they're kind of letting those ideas and principles govern them, right? And so that's kind of starts it off for the United States. And a century and many decades later, you see the creation of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. And among many things, the Declaration was really kind of a list of grievances against the British Crown, right? And kind of this proclamation that the colonists who were under the British Crown, that they would kind of create a new nation for themselves, known as the United States of America. And so these colonists were kind of suffering from, unfair taxation, unfair laws against the British Crown, and they decided that they wanted to create this new colony for themselves, or they wanted to create their own nation, right, where kind of they would govern themselves. And so that was kind of, that took up a large chunk of the Declaration. However, the Declaration was also really, or it is really famous for the ideas that are kind of contained within it. And one is this very famous line that I'm going to read for us, which says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so you see this kind of, the ideas contained within this line echoed a lot throughout history, and especially throughout American history. And so next you see the creation of the Articles of Confederation in 1776. And this is kind of the first constitution of the United States, right? And so by now the colonists are fighting the British Crown, and they kind of need some sort of a document that kind of serves as a constitution, right? And so the Articles is that document, right? And so within the Articles, it states that the states are considered independent and sovereign, but that Congress will be given certain rights, right? And so Congress is kind of that central authoritative government kind of figure that this Articles of Confederation creates. And Congress could essentially make treaties, coin money, levy taxes, and regulate commerce. But kind of a weakness of the Articles was that Congress was weak, right? This body couldn't really do much. And aside from that, there was no executive or judicial branch. And so the Articles of Confederation is really kind of almost like a draft to the real Constitution that's to come. Now, the image on the left was actually drawn a couple decades earlier, but the idea, I think, captured within this image is really powerful because the Articles of Confederation really sought to kind of band together these very distinct states together, right, and kind of form one nation, right? And the same idea was actually captured in this picture, where each part of the snake is actually a colony, right? So you see, for example, NY standing for New York, right? And the kind of idea that the artist, who was Benjamin Franklin, had was that we will be stronger if we're kind of united, right? And so the same idea is kind of applied here. You see later that the Constitution is created and signed in 1787, and the Constitution is made up of many parts. It's made up of the preamble, it's made up of the articles, the sections, and the amendments. And what was really so great about the Constitution was that it created a section for new things to be added onto it, right? And those things were known as amendments. And so actually the first 10 amendments are actually known very famously as the Bill of Rights, and the Bill of Rights includes ideas such as, the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech, the freedom to practice whatever religion you want, and the freedom to kind of assemble, among many other things that are listed within those first 10 amendments. But what was really so great about this Constitution was this idea that it created three different branches of government, and they were known as the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch, right? And so the judicial branch is kind of like, the court, the judges. You have the executive branch, which is more of like the president, and then you have the legislative branch, which is like Congress, right? And so these three distinct branches you see kind of interacting together in what is known as checks and balances. And so this idea of checks and balances is really the idea that these three branches of government would check and balance one another, meaning that not one branch, or excuse me, one branch would not be more powerful than another, right? And so this diagram does a pretty good job of kind of outlining that for us. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through every single arrow here, but feel free to pause it and take a look at it. However, I will go over kind of the checks and balances that occurs between the executive and the legislative branch, for example. And so if you see the blue arrow going down from the executive to the legislative branch, you see that the executive branch has the ability to veto legislation. So if the legislative branch decides to come up with a bill, the president has the right to veto that. Similarly, in a way to kind of check that balance, if the legislative branch is able to come up with a majority of votes, this branch is also able to kind of override that veto. And so you kind of see this very brilliant idea of these three branches of government kind of balancing each other out and making sure that not one branch gets too powerful. And so lastly, you see the Federalist Papers, which are kind of written in 1787. And these Federalist Papers are a series of essays that are written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. And they're really written in support of the ratification of the Constitution, right? And so when the Constitution is created, we have these distinct states. And in order for the Constitution to become the law of the land, in order for the Constitution to kind of govern society, right? You need the support from the states, right? You need the ratification. And so, some states needed more convincing than others. And so these Federalist Papers were really written. And these three men did a really great job of kind of trying to convince the public that this kind of a constitution was needed in order to kind of govern the colonies. So that's it for the US founding documents. Hopefully that was helpful.